beginning of this week, in the middle of last week's Torah portion, when Moshe goes to Hashem, when Hashem sends Moshe to Paro to release the Jews from Egypt, Paro says, "Who is this God? Lo yadati es Hashem. I don't know this God you're talking about, and lo shalech. I'm not going to send the Jews free because I don't recognize any God." And right after that, Moshe Rabbeinu says, "Listen, all God is asking for is to let the Jews go derech shloshes yamim. We just want a 3-day excursion into the desert to worship God for 3 days, and we're coming right back." And the famous question is, why did Moshe lie to Paro? Why wasn't he honest with him? He knew he wasn't coming back in 3 days. He knew this was a one-way ticket out of Egypt. So why does Moshe say to Paro, we just want to go for 3 days? So there's a very interesting mashal given, a parable given, about a fellow who comes to a king, to a palace. And he observes what's going on. What does he see? He sees the king is sitting with his advisors, with his ministers. And then the people in the kitchen are preparing the meal. They serve it to the king and the advisors. After they clean up, the kitchen staff, the waiters and the servants eat all the leftovers, so to speak, right? And then after they finish eating the leftovers, they take the bones and whatever's left and they put it down on the floor for the dogs to eat. So what happened here? There was a meal prepared for the king, for the advisors. But once the king and the advisors got to enjoy it, then the servants got to enjoy it. And then ultimately the dogs in the kitchen got to eat what was left over. And so too, the parable is, in this world, there are those who are like the king's advisors. Those are the righteous people who understand Hashem, who have a close, intimate bond with Hashem, like the king's friends and advisors. And then there are people in the world that are not so connected to Hashem, they don't understand Hashem's ways, but they recognize there's a God and they're here to serve God, and they benefit and enjoy the gifts of Hashem as the servants do. But then there are people like the dogs. They're oblivious. They don't even know there's a king. They don't recognize Hashem. But they take everything from this world, they enjoy it without any acknowledgement of the source of where they got everything from. So here you have a conversation between Moshe and Paro. You can't get two opposites, right? Moshe is the greatest prophet. He just spoke to God at the burning bush. He understands who Hashem is. And he's trying to get through to a guy like Paro, who's the biggest narcissist of all time, who thinks he's God. So I don't recognize God. So how does he communicate to a man like Paro? How do you talk to someone who's on a whole different wavelength than you? So the Al-Shulch says something very beautiful. The Al-Shulch says that we know that Hashem doesn't test a person more than their capabilities. As the Talmud says, "L'fum gam lo shichna," you only load the donkey according to the weight it can carry. Hashem doesn't give you a challenge or a test that's beyond your pay grade, that's beyond what you're capable of doing. Since God gives free choice to a person, if He gives you something more than you can handle, then it's not free choice because you can't do it. So God knows His customers, so to speak. And He knows that Paro's Paro. He's a big egomaniac, a narcissist. He thinks he's God. He doesn't recognize God. He says, "Lo yadati es Hashem." So God says, if I send Moshe and say, let the Jews go free permanently, that's asking too much from Paro. Allow his whole slave population free for a God that he doesn't even recognize. So God says, ask him to do something that he could overcome. Let them go for 3 days. That's all I'm asking for. That he has the ability to do. And if he says no, now he deserves the plagues, because I asked him for something he's capable of doing, releasing them for 3 days. And if he won't even do that, now the plagues begin. Dams, Hardeya, so on and so forth. And the lesson is very powerful in life, that sometimes people convince themselves that I can't do this, I can't do that. This is, if I would have been in this circumstance or that circumstance, been raised in this family, that family, and I had this upbringing, that upbringing. If God presents you with a challenge or a test, it means that He knows you are capable. And He's giving you this challenge and this test because He wants to elevate you to a higher level. He wants you to bring you closer to Him and in closer recognition and understanding of who Hashem is. And therefore, realize that this is a custom-made challenge tailored for your capabilities, and you have the power and the strength to overcome it. One of my favorite stories is the one told by Noach Teller from Israel. He says that there was a Baal Tshuva learning in Yerushalayim. And he had come from some gang in, who knows, California. He had a lot of tattoos, piercings, everything else. But somehow he ended up in yeshiva in Yerushalayim. And it was Erev Yom Kippur. And they told him the custom is everyone goes to the mikveh before Yom Kippur. He's never been to a mikveh. But they tell him what he needs to do. He goes to a mikveh in Yerushalayim. He walks in, he sees hundreds of religious Jews with white beards and payas, and they're all going in the mikveh. And he says, what am I going to do? If I get undressed, My body's filled with tattoos, and not very holy tattoos. In this mikveh, they're going to see all the women on my biceps and everything else. So he goes to a corner, he takes 3 towels, he covers himself from his neck down to his toes, and he says, I'll go there, I'll quickly go in and out, nobody's going to see me. As he's making his way to the mikveh, to the pool of water, somebody brushes against him, and his towel goes falling to the ground. And suddenly he's there with all of his tattoos in this mikveh with all these rabbis and holy Jews. And he says he feels like 100 eyes are staring at him. He's so embarrassed, he's turning red. And he said an old Jew walks over to him with a long white beard. And he says, don't feel bad. I also have a tattoo. And he rolls up his sleeve and he shows him his number from the concentration camp. And he says, I've been through my hell, you've been through your hell, but tonight's Yom Kippur, we could start over again. Wherever God puts you in life, He gives you the strength to overcome whatever you're in. And even Paro is not tested beyond his capabilities. Surely Hashem doesn't give us a test that we cannot pass.